Hi, welcome to Mondays with Mary. Last week we looked at Mary's motherhood, but Mary is unique in human history in that she is both mother and virgin. The Catholic Church teaches that Mary is a perpetual virgin, namely that she was a virgin before the birth of Jesus, but also during the birth of Jesus, Jesus having passed through her as light through glass, as the Church Father said, and after, so she never entered into marital relationships her entire life. So Mary is ever virgin. This church teaching is rooted in sacred tradition. We find this tradition being expressed as early as 150 in the Proto-Evangelium of James, an apocryphal gospel, but also supported by and upheld by early church fathers. We have Origen in the 3rd century, Athanasius in the 4th century, Augustine in the 5th century, we have St. Ambrose, and so many other church fathers who supported and taught that Mary was ever virgin. This all led up to the 5th Ecumenical Council in Constantinople in 553 when it was officially proclaimed a doctrine, and has been upheld by the church ever since. In fact, during the Reformation, the likes of even Martin Luther and other reformers believed in the perpetual virginity of Mary. This is because it's also rooted in Scripture. It has evidence in Scripture, such as in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verse 34. After the angel Gabriel appears to Mary and says, "You're going to conceive and bear a son, and he will be the Messiah," Mary questions. She says, "How can this be, for I do not know man?" Now, Mary was already betrothed to Joseph, so surely she knew how children came into the world. If Mary had expected to have relationships with Joseph, she wouldn't have asked, "How can this be, for I do not know man?" She would have known how she was going to conceive, in fact. And so, simply put, "I do not know man" reveals that Mary had intended to remain a virgin. This, coupled with the fast forward all the way to the end of Jesus' life now, at the foot of the cross, chapter 19 of John, verses 26 and 27, Jesus is looking out for Mary, and he says to St. John, "Behold your mother," and St. John takes Mary into his home. This is because there was no other children for Mary to go home with. If Jesus had brothers and sisters, or Mary had other children, they would have taken care of Mary. But instead, Jesus had to look out for her from the cross, and John, who was not a relation of Jesus, brought her into his home. That wouldn't have been necessary if Mary, in fact, had other children. So what do we make of the times in the Gospels where it's referred to Jesus actually having brothers? Well, the question is whether or not brothers necessarily means biological brothers, or are there other ways that the word brother can be used in Scripture? First of all, there's a simple fact that in Aramaic and Hebrew the word cousin doesn't exist. And so when they're calling each other brother, they're often referring to a cousin, or another close relative. In Genesis 13, Abraham calls Lot his brother. We know that Abraham wasn't in fact Lot's brother, but he was his uncle. But in order to express that, the word brother was used. We find something similar with Mary at the foot of the cross. It says that Mary's sister Mary. Now, it's not very likely that Mary had an actual sister named Mary, so it was most likely a cousin or a relative of Mary. Also, we find that the brothers that are referred to in Matthew 13:55, James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, we find in Matthew 27 that James and Joseph are actually the sons of another Mary. And so they are related to Jesus, but they are not actually his biological brothers. And as far as Judas goes, we find in the book of Jude, chapter 1, verse 1, that he says, "I am the brother of James." And so he is the relative of James. He's not Jesus' blood brother. And so we have three very clear examples in Scripture where brother is being used to denote cousin or relative or relation, and not biological brother or sister. Furthermore, we find that the term brother can be used in a very spiritual sense. In Matthew chapter 12, the crowd says, "Jesus, your brother and your mother are here. Your brothers and your mother are here." Jesus says, "Who are my mother and my brothers, but those who do the will of my Father?" So in Jesus' time, in Jesus' mind, you are brothers when you are doing God's will. That doesn't mean that they're all biological brothers. Just like in also the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, "You are all brothers." telling us that we're all related. Now, that doesn't mean we're related biologically, but that we're related spiritually. We see the same thing in the writings of St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. He says that Jesus appeared to 500 of the brothers. Now, surely Mary did not have 500 children. So in this brief time looking at the perpetual virginity of Mary, we see what it means that she is a virgin before, during, and after the birth of Jesus, and that it had the consensus of the early church, continued to have the support of tradition, and as evidence in Scripture, Mary in fact remained a virgin, and so she is the Virgin and Mother.